All right, let's bring him on. Bruce Feldman covers everything except the NBA, and we're done talking it right now. Bruce, it's good as always to see you, buddy. Bruce Feldman, Fox Sports college football reporter. So you spend a lot of college football reporters cover the draft, but you have a lot of sources on this, and there's a lot of interesting things here. For instance, we've said from the beginning, J.J. McCarthy, much like Alabama quarterbacks, played with a lead, a great run game, usually the best coach, usually the best roster. Outside of an occasional Ohio State or Georgia game, he was playing downhill. I tend to like quarterbacks who either give me huge numbers, like a Burrow at a football factory, or they're overcomers. They carry people. Mahomes or, those kind of guys in college where they're asked to carry people. He didn't really do either. He didn't give me huge numbers, didn't carry anybody. That's what worries me. When you talk to scouts on JJ, what part of his game, Bruce, is under the radar?
The biggest part really is his athleticism. I don't think people give him enough credit for just what a dynamic athlete he is. You would see him make and create and run when they really needed him to. You saw that against Ohio State in some critical situations. You saw it actually in the playoff where he would do some really athletic things. The sample size is much smaller, even though he played a lot of games. You remember, he was not in. There's a handful of games in the Big Ten. He was not even in this late, in the third quarter. He wasn't in the fourth quarter. I just think what you're getting with him, everybody likes him in the interviews. They're impressed by how he conducts himself, how football smart he is. I think there's an aura about him they like. You'll hear some comparisons a little bit like, oh, he's kind of a Brock Purdy kind of quarterback in terms of what they think they're going to see in terms of what he was asked to do. But in terms of he's much more athletic than Kirk Cousins.
Yes.
So I think those comparisons, I don't think they're spot on. I can see some of the overlay for that. He is a guy from one of the coaches I talked to in the NFL this week who felt like both JJ and Drake May, they were guys who were going to need a little more time, especially Drake May, but both of them, and they're both younger players. They're not Michael Penix. They're not Bo Nix, who had been in college football for 6 years and had played a ton. These guys hadn't played that much. And I think that's what's going to be interesting to see, how high he goes and where he goes.
Yeah, we said yesterday, if JJ is Kirk Cousins with mobility and inexpensive, that's a quarterback in the NFL. I mean, Kirk is a borderline A. You lack a little bit of juice moving, and he's expensive. That limits the roster. Well, if he's got juice moving, as you say, and he's cheap, that's a pretty good quarterback. For the record, Sam Darnold, probably the starter if they got McCarthy, much like McCarthy, has a little juice athletically. So you'd have kind of quarterbacks who play the same style. So that's interesting.
I think the other part with Sam, and it's good to mention him, was, I think you and I were both very high on him coming out of college. Yeah. Really good athlete. I think temperament, leadership was really good. He went into a bad situation, and I think he buckled with that. I mean, there's the famous clip from I'm Seeing Ghosts. Yeah. And I think that's the challenge and the risk with all these young quarterbacks. If they go into a really bad situation, you can ruin them. And I think that's why, it's maybe 50-50 on the quarterbacks who get drafted. I think almost all of them have a lot of talent.
Yes.
It's just, I think people tend to forget Patrick Mahomes, sat for a year behind Alex Smith, who was a guy he could really learn from and learn the right things. And then he's in Andy Reid's system. Whereas you go someplace else, you're forced to play. Maybe the quarterback room is not very good. There's nobody you can lean on. And then also there's no Andy Reid. You're with a defensive guy or a first-time offensive coordinator. It's a really kind of fickle dynamic that they're walking into.
So Jayden Daniels, I was told, is Washington, they believe, is the best fit. So Cliff Kingsbury has used quarterbacks who are mobile and accurate. And I like Jayden a lot. I watched him at Arizona State. He was really thin. He's still pretty thin, but he's developed. The numbers are pretty profound. Is there anything? I see a little Lamar. He looks good in the pocket. Brian Kelly can be tough on quarterbacks. He ran through them, but he loves this kid, and this kid just got better. I mean, if you look at the 2 years with Brian, he got better, so he's coachable. Are there any concerns with Jayden? What do the scouts say that you hear?
Scouts really like him. The stuff I heard from coaches, especially, it's first of all, the Arizona State part, 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years. That program was in disarray around him. Right? He continued to physically develop. Love how he grew at LSU. He was very good as a transfer his first year, and then he made dramatic improvement as a passer, how he saw the field
no turnovers
in 2023. Yeah. There is some Lamar. I mean, he's not as physically strong as Lamar. I think the only hesitation you get on some people is, in terms of outside the number throws, he has a good enough arm. It's not an elite arm, but he's accurate. He has a work ethic that people love. And then his ability to extend plays. And you see him show up in a lot of big games. You watch what he did against Alabama. You watch what he did, and granted, he has 2 first-round receivers he was throwing to. But he was going up against a lot of big-time athletes.
How about Arizona State against Herbert at Oregon? Wild shootout.
Yeah.
You look like you're watching 2 first-round quarterbacks years ago.
And he's in a bunch of those, right? And I think that he is a guy, to me, the more people you talk to, the more you're like, oh, there's a lot of people who actually feel more comfortable with him than any quarterback in this draft.
So let's talk about Caleb Williams. He is going to Chicago, obviously. I have, maybe because I know him a little bit and I know a lot of people around him, my take has been the fingernails, the jumping into his mom's arms, some people push back. He's a little cocky with you in the interview. I'm like, first of all, anytime you're the first anything, it's difficult. He's the first NIL superstar.
In a major market.
Let's give him a little pass if he got into his feels a little. I mean, I know at 21, when I got a new pair of shoes, I thought I had game. Okay, kid was making $4 million, more than the assistant coaches. So I just think L.A., money, NIL, I can get over fingernails. I think he has a sense of humor. I've talked to him 3 or 4 times. I think he's a bright, quick, funny kid. Very confident. Any of that stuff worry even Chicago, though? All the stuff, the peripheral stuff?
I don't know how much it worries Chicago. I know there are people in the draft process who love his talent, but have some concerns about him in terms of, you're going into, I just mentioned the Chiefs situation. He gets compared to Patrick Mahomes a lot, fair or unfair. Patrick Mahomes got to be behind Alex Smith for a year and watched him.
Right.
That's not this situation. You have Tyson Bagent, and you're going to have Brett Rippon. That's not Alex Smith.
And a defensive coach.
And also, defensive coach who, is definitely, maybe he'll get another year after this year, but it's not like the ideal situation.
Right.
You have a first-time offensive, a new offensive coordinator who's going in there. Then, on top of that, you don't have the Andy Reid factor of a guy who knows exactly what he's doing,
right,
running an offense and running a team. So I think there's a lot of stuff that's TBD. Now, maybe Keenan Allen becomes the guy he can lean on and say, hey, you're supposed to do it this way. Because, look, he won a Heisman at USC, and he had a great – but, this past year was a borderline disaster for USC, right? They shouldn't have been that bad, right? And so I think some of the stuff about, okay, is he going to be the team guy? Is he going to listen to the people around him? Who is he listening to? I think those are things that people have legitimate concerns. I don't think it's like, oh, the fingernails or whatever. A lot of that stuff I think is more anecdotal and separate. But I think the bigger things are, how is he going to respond to, real adversity, but also trying to be the face of a team and going into a locker room and, hey, we're all about winning games, not about, all this other stuff that was going on with him at USC.
Is there a player, because none of these quarterbacks are quite ready. I saw a quote yesterday from Bill Belichick. He said the only player he's ever had in his career that was ready week 1, year 1, was Lawrence Taylor. He said it doesn't
There's
work.
definitely no Lawrence Taylor in this draft.
No.
This is not a good defensive, frontline draft. For sure.
Is there a player, I kind of think it's Harrison, that's just ready to be productive right away?
Yeah, I think Harrison and Odunze are really polished and character-wise really solid. Now, the guy who I've heard the most stuff, so this past, couple of weeks I've been talking to a lot of NFL position coaches and scouts. The one, because I would have been saying the 2 of them are the closest thing to can't miss in terms of character. They're really polished. They're both good-sized guys. But it's the one who is the wow guy is actually Malik Neighbors. I mean, there are NFL receivers coaches I talk to who think Malik Neighbors is the number 1. A
lot of yards after catch potential.
Just fun, just incredibly explosive, just has this dog mentality, and is so dynamic. And one of the receivers coaches I talked to 2 days ago said he's the best receiver coming out of college in a long, long time. He said, I would have said since Jamar Chase, and Jamar Chase had great film. I actually think he is more explosive than Jamar Chase. Now, he's not quite as physically strong, but he's not that far off it.
It looks like to me it's a quarterback, left tackle draft. I think all drafts are now receiver drafts. I just think they all are because.
But this one's much better than the one last year. You had Quentin Johnston, whose hands were spotty. You didn't have a lot of big guys. This draft is much better than last year receivers.
I don't remember a draft with 8 left tackles like early. Is that the position? Joe Alt, I've been told. I've heard there's a lot of people. Alt doesn't have a huge ceiling, but should be good really quickly. He'll be a 2-time Pro Bowler, not Trent Williams. That's what I heard from an executive in the league. They like Alt. They don't love any of the tackles, but they like about 8 of them to 10 of them. There's a kid at Duke that can go inside, outside. Oregon State kid. Yeah. People say is like as good a run blocker. You'll see it tackle. You just won't see him any better anywhere on the planet. Is that the best position in this draft, do you think?
I still think it's receiver because I think you have 3 elite players at the top of it. Joe Alt to me is maybe in that realm. I don't think he's as far. You can get guys, offensive linemen also, where I think there is, not to the degree of quarterbacks, but there is kind of a boom or bust feel to some of them, right? So, you mentioned Oregon State, Troy Fautanu at Washington, similar kind of player where really physical. There's coaches in the Pac-12 who actually thought Troy was a little better than Talisi from Oregon State, but they're both, they're bruisers, they're physical guys who I think can play outside, but also if you need them, are good enough to play inside as well, and versatile and smart and tough. There's a couple of, I don't want to say real boom or bust guys, but Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma. Bill Bedenbaugh was the O-line coach there. He was with Lincoln before. He's an old Leach guy. He has cranked out a lot of star NFL linemen.
Oklahoma's got a lot of linemen.
Guyton might be the most talented guy he's ever worked with, but he's really raw. So you may be getting a couple of years where he's got to work through it. He kind of came to offensive line really late. And then you have a guy in Amarius Mims at Georgia is this enormous guy, 6'8", 340. People worry, I talk to in the NFL, worry a little bit about just in terms of durability when somebody is that big.
Sure.
He's only started 7 or 8 games. But there are a lot of offensive tackles that are interesting. You just don't know, do they go in the 18 to 30 range? Barton from Duke, people like him because he can play so much. I don't think anyone loves him in any one spot.
But he can play 3 spots.
Yeah. Is he going to be elite at any of them? I don't know. You have a really good center from Oregon and Jackson's Power Johnson. Yeah. Zach Frazier's a really good center that people really like from West Virginia. Yeah. So I think it's a good offensive line draft.
Yeah. Finally, Deion Sanders, 14 players leave. I said earlier, transfer portal. 90% of the players that you get or leaving are not foundational. Quarterbacks matter more than any. I don't look at this as he's got a sales pitch. Some kids fall in love with the pitch and move on. What do you make of what's happening at Colorado?
I think it's kind of reflective of a lot of what's going on actually around the country, just not to the same degree. And I don't want to say this is the exact or this is a CU thing, but I think one thing I'm hearing a lot of in this cycle is you're seeing a lot of kids go back into the portal and after not being in there very long. And what is happening is a lot of players are finding out that the things they're being told they think they're getting aren't exactly what they're getting. They're not getting that much because they may be told, yeah, it's going to be $400,000 or it's going to be $200,000, but it's a car that you're getting a rental. You don't own it. So it's not like you or I could turn around and sell it. Right. It's a house that you have access to, but you don't own it. So there's some of those things that I think are tough for a lot of the kids to figure out right now. They think they're getting one thing, they're not. There's a lot of times I've heard stories of guys who think they're getting $800,000 or $900,000. They maybe end up with $200,000. So you get some frustration on that end. I don't think this is. In Deion's case at CU, they were so bad when he got there, and he made a huge overhaul of the program. And I think a lot of it is now you've had a handful of assistants. Sean Lewis is offense coordinator, is now the head coach at San Diego State. So you've had some people come and go. I suspect, especially with Shedeur there, they will go, as they go into a new league, from 1 win to 4 wins, at least, I think, 8. I get it. I think they will be significantly better. I don't know how much better than 8, but, I wouldn't, you're going to see a lot of guys, especially with grad transfers, come and go.
Yeah.
And I just think that people are looking for the right fit. And sometimes people are constantly hitting the reset button, like the kid on the video game who doesn't like the start of it. And then all of a sudden, like, let me start that all over again.
Good seeing you, buddy, as always.
You
Bruce
too.
Feldman, the Athletic, Fox Sports.
You've upgraded your shooting guard here, I think. I know Jason fancies himself as a shooter.
No, you couldn't have J-Mac and Jordan in the same backcourt. It would be, it
would basically be a black hole. It would be no passing, bad shots.
It would be
high
Kyrie
volume.
and Kobe White. You'd be fun to watch, but I'm not sure you'd defend anybody.
High volume.
I think there's more Jordan Poole going on here than Kobe White.
Yeah.
Bruce, you're too kind.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Uncle Colin. Subscribe here to get the latest from the herd, including exclusive behind-the-scenes videos and more, wherever you may be, however you may be watching. Thanks again for making us part of your day.